Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump says the U.S. will set the price if a trade deal with China doesn't come through. Iris Tao brings us the president's latest remarks on tariffs and details of his new executive orders. The orders target what he describes as ideological overreach in schools. As some Democrats try to return a deported illegal immigrant to the U.S., Border Czar Tom Homan explains why he thinks U.S. courts can't order El Salvador to return him. Arian Pazdar has the immigration update. Diplomatic fallout after a terror attack that killed 26 people in Kashmir. India blames Pakistan, downgrading ties and suspending a crucial water-sharing treaty. Protests erupt in cities across India as world leaders react to the worst attack on civilians in the country in nearly 2 decades. The president of the Palestinian Authority calls for Hamas to lay down their weapons. Meanwhile, Iran takes a step closer to allowing a team to monitor their nuclear facilities. Jayson reports.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Border Czar Tom Homan today justifying the deportation of illegal immigrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And President Trump says it's impossible to give every illegal immigrant a trial before deporting them. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar is in Latin America with this immigration update.
Designated terrorist from the United States. He's home. He's a citizen of El Salvador, a native El Salvador, who had due process, despite what you're hearing, been ordered removed by 2 separate immigration judges.
Border Czar Tom Homan on Wednesday explaining why the Trump administration deported illegal immigrant Abrego Garcia. The administration previously provided evidence indicating that Garcia is a member of the MS-13 gang, but some Democrats are trying to bring him back to the U.S., pointing to a 2019 court order saying that Garcia shouldn't be deported to El Salvador. The administration deported Garcia in March on the grounds of him having entered the U.S. illegally and accusations by his wife, who previously testified that Garcia abused her. Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador and is currently being held at a facility in his home country.
I don't think any court can order another nation, a sovereign nation, to take a citizen national from their country in their custody and give him back to the U.S.
Critics argue Garcia should have had a court trial in the U.S. before being deported. On Tuesday, the White House estimated that over 20 million people are currently in the U.S. illegally. President Trump now explains why it would be difficult to hold a trial for each immigrant before deporting them.
A judge can't say, no, you have to have a trial. The trial's going to take 2 years, and no, we're going to have a very dangerous country if we're not allowed to do what we're entitled to do. And I won an election based on the fact that we get them out.
Earlier this week, Trump made a similar point, asking how can Biden let millions of criminals into our country, totally unchecked and unvetted, with no legal authority to do so. Yet I, in order to make up for this assault to our nation, am expected to go through a lengthy legal process. But some Democrats previously suggested that this is a slippery slope. One of them is Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, who recently visited Garcia in El Salvador.
If they can trample his rights, as the president's talking about doing, then they can trample the rights of everyone who lives in America.
He added that every accused criminal in the U.S. should be guaranteed a fair trial. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And Homan today also criticized New York City officials for blocking the mayor's executive order that gives ICE agents access to Rikers Island jail. NTD's Arlene Richards has the latest.
A clash between Mayor Eric Adams and New York City officials has led to a court order on Monday blocking federal agents from access to Rikers Island jail, where Border Czar Tom Homan says several terrorist gang members are being held.
You got the city council filing a lawsuit to shut down our memorandum of understanding, the executive order he signed to get us in Rikers Island.
A New York judge ordered city officials to temporarily halt a plan allowing federal immigration agents to operate within the Rikers Island jail complex. Judge Mary Rosado barred the city from taking any steps toward negotiating, signing, or implementing any memorandum of understanding with the federal government before an April 25th hearing in a suit challenging the plan. Adams said years ago City Council member Robert Holden suggested ICE presence at Rikers Island.
It was interesting. The first person that brought that to me about utilizing Rikers, ICE on Rikers was Councilman Holden. This is before this administration took office. Holden reached out. As a matter of fact, I have a few text messages from him that's saying, listen, why aren't we doing this?
Homan said with Adams' permission, Immigration and Customs agents were able to successfully collaborate with state and local law enforcement, leading to the indictment of 27 suspected members of Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua.
We send a strong message to Tren de Aragua. We're going to keep doing this to every TDA member, MS-13 members removed from the country.
Attorney General Pam Bondi announced on Tuesday that 27 alleged members or affiliates of Tren de Aragua had been charged under the RICO statute, a law with widespread application that was historically used to break up a mob organization. ICE agents previously had a presence on Rikers Island, but they were banned from operating there in 2014 under New York City's sanctuary laws. In February, Adams announced he would allow agents to return to Rikers to assist with gang and drug-related investigations. Council members in their lawsuit accuse Adams of agreeing to plan as a way to pay off the Trump administration in exchange for dropping criminal charges against him. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
President Trump says it's okay if we don't make a deal with China and that the U.S. will set the price if a fair deal doesn't come through. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening to you, Iris. What is the latest on tariffs?
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So just now inside the Oval Office, President Trump, while signing new executive orders, told reporters that if we don't make a deal, we're going to just set the price or set the tariffs over the next couple of weeks. He asked that countries can make a determination on whether they want to do business in the U.S., and though he hopes that they will, but it's okay that if countries, including China, don't want to do it. Watch.
I think so. Over the next 2-3 weeks, we'll be setting the number, and we're going to pick. Could be for China, too. Could be for China. Well, right now it's 145%. That's very high. It got there because of the fentanyl. They're sending, massive amounts of fentanyl into our country and killing a lot of people. Probably 200,000.
The president asked that the U.S. is having active conversations with China when it comes to tariffs and trade. He also again criticizes China for ripping the U.S. off by, for example, taking U.S. plants and companies over and now having them in China. President Trump says he's now reversing it at a speed that nobody has seen before. He also says that the U.S. is working well with other countries when it comes to potential trade deals. He says, for example, that he's been talking with the Prime Minister of Canada and that they're working on a deal with Canada. He asked that India is expected to lower their tariffs on the U.S. And meanwhile, today, President Trump also signed 7 executive orders when it comes to education, for example, including one that to enhance the capacity of HBCUs, ability to deliver high-quality education, also one to boost AI in U.S. education, another one to what they call overhaul the higher education accreditation system, ensuring the education accreditors evaluate colleges and universities based on merit, not DEI or ideological guidelines. Here's what Trump said about it. Watch.
One in their class in a high school someplace in New Jersey or in Mississippi, they can't get into the best schools. What is that all about?
Yeah, and I think that gets to your policy, sir, of meritocracy, that we should be looking at those who have real merit to get in.
And that is in line with the Trump administration's policy of eliminating DEI from not only education, but also from federal workforce. As we just saw, Education Secretary Linda McMahon was also inside the Oval Office. Back to you.
And Iris, the president also talked about Russia and Ukraine today. Tell us the latest on that.
Sure. So inside the Oval Office, President Trump now said that he thinks Russia is ready to have a deal and that the U.S. already has a deal with Russia. But it turns out that Ukraine is now the more difficult one to negotiate with. Watch.
I think Russia is ready, and a lot of people said Russia wanted to go for the whole thing. And I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky, and I hope that Zelensky, I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelensky. So far it's been harder, but that's okay. It's all right. But I think we have a deal with both. I hope they do it because I'm looking to save. And, you know, we spend a lot of money, but this is about a lot of humanity.
Meanwhile, in the Truth Social post this afternoon, President Trump criticized Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky for making it more difficult to settle the war by saying that Ukraine won't recognize Russia's claim of Crimea, which happened back in 2014. Meanwhile, Zelensky responded later by pointing to a 2018 statement during the first Trump term, saying that the U.S. will never recognize Russian sovereignty over Crimea. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance today is saying that if Russia and Ukraine don't strike a deal, the U.S. would well just walk away. And meanwhile, the U.S. is focused on talking with Russia this week with Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, in Russia this week to talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin for the fourth time. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. Protests erupted in several parts of India today following yesterday's deadly terror attack in Kashmir. At least 26 people were killed and 17 injured when terrorists opened fire at a popular tourist spot in the scenic territory. India is downgrading diplomatic ties with Pakistan and suspending a crucial water-sharing treaty that has withstood 2 wars between the nuclear-armed rivals. Pakistan said it would respond more fully tomorrow. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on how locals and world leaders are responding to the tragedy.
Demonstrators walked through city streets in Kashmir decrying Tuesday's violence. It marked the worst attack on civilians in India since the 2008 Mumbai shootings. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, but police blamed the attacks on terrorists fighting against Indian rule. India and Pakistan each administer a part of Kashmir, but both claim the territory in its entirety. Protesters were seen burning effigies and chanting slogans.
Humanity has been killed and we cannot tolerate it. Our religion does not teach us this. Our Prophet Muhammad does not teach us this. No Muslim was killed, no Hindu was killed, but humanity was killed and we strongly condemn it. It was a condemnable act of cowardice by the terrorists. The tourists were asked their names before being killed. It is a shameful act.
European Union President Ursula von der Leyen expressed her support on X, writing, quote, "I know that India's spirit is unbreakable. You will stand strong in this ordeal, and Europe will stand with you." President Trump took to Truth Social, posting, quote, "Deeply disturbing news out of Kashmir. The United States stands strong with India against terrorism. We pray for the souls of those lost and for the recovery of the injured." Vice President J.D. Vance also reacted to the attack after visiting the Taj Mahal with his family.
I want to just, of course, issue our condolences to the people of Kashmir who were affected by this terrible terrorist attack. The president's already spoken with Prime Minister Modi. I believe I'll be speaking with him later this afternoon. And obviously, we're providing whatever assistance and help we can provide to the government, to the people of India.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi cut short his 2-day visit to Saudi Arabia and returned to New Delhi Wednesday morning. Indian forces are on a manhunt for the perpetrators. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The president of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has asked Hamas to lay down their weapons as Israel increases operations in the Gaza Strip. And in another development, the UN nuclear watchdog says Iran is working with a team to discuss the monitoring of their nuclear facilities. NTD's Jayson has the details.
Israeli forces on Wednesday struck a building in the Gaza Strip that was housing displaced residents. A local woman explained what happened.
We found our heads scratched and blood dripping from us. We don't know where from. We started looking for our young children and running, pulling them as we went and running.
Israeli forces said that parts of the building were being used as command and control centers by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad to plan and execute terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians and troops. Israel also accused the terrorist groups of using the civilian population as human shields for their terrorist activities. Israel said they took numerous steps before the strike to mitigate harm to civilians. Meanwhile, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who oversees the West Bank, called on Hamas to lay down their weapons and to let the Palestinian Authority run the Gaza Strip. Abbas also called for Hamas to release the hostages, saying, quote, "Just hand over the hostages and let's get out of this mess." However, Abbas's administration has also faced international criticism for its policies that some critics call pay for slay, in which the Palestinian Authority pays families of those who commit terrorist acts against Israelis and were either killed or detained in the process. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister was in China on Wednesday. He said the nuclear talks with the U.S. were moving in the right direction, but it was still too soon to judge.
If Americans continue to stay in a constructive way and avoid any unrealistic, undoable demands, I am confident that we can get to somewhere and we can conclude a good deal at the end.
And on the same day, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, said Iran had agreed to allow a team in to discuss restoring camera surveillance at their nuclear sites. And he said the agency knows what to look for.
We have a timeline of what has been happening, and even including during this time where we lost what we call continuity of knowledge. So we can have the best possible shot at reconstructing the picture, if you want.
He also said that Iran must prove that they are not developing a nuclear weapon. Jayson Perry, NTD News.
And Secretary of State Marco Rubio addressed the matter today on Barry Weiss's Honestly podcast. He said President Trump does not want a war over the issue and that Tehran can have a civilian nuclear program as long as they stop enriching uranium. He added that, quote, "We have good people negotiating." Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called on the International Monetary Fund and World Bank today to refocus on their core missions of economic stability and development. Bessent focused in on China and the impact of its activities on the global economy.
China in particular is in need of a rebalancing. Recent data shows the Chinese economy tilting even further away from consumption toward manufacturing. China's economic system, with growth driven by manufacturing exports, will continue to create even more serious imbalances with its trading partners if the status quo is allowed to continue. China's current economic model is built on exporting its way out of its economic troubles. It's an unsustainable model that is not only harming China, but the entire world.
Bessent added, quote, "Treating China, the second largest country in the world, as a developing country is absurd." In addition to pushing for more pressure on China, Bessent urged the IMF to reprioritize the world economy. The Treasury Secretary denounced the World Financial Organization for devoting, quote, "disproportionate time and resources to work on climate change, gender, and social issues." Bessent added, quote, "Mission creep has knocked these institutions off course." The U.S. plans to cancel its tax exemption on low-value shipments from China and Hong Kong next month. How will that affect the air cargo industry? And what is the full story behind why Chinese-made products are sold cheaper in the U.S.? Tune into Capital Report with Steve Lance on NTD at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to hear analysis from Derek Lossing, founder of Cirrus Global Advisors. Coming up, the National Institutes of Health gives an update on an upcoming study on autism that RFK Jr. says is the first of its kind. A New Jersey wildfire expected to grow and could become the state's largest blaze in 20 years. David Lamb has the update. The countdown is on. Starting next month, you'll need a new kind of ID to board a domestic flight. Millions of Americans still don't have their real ID, and the deadline is just days away. Christina Corona tells us more after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. National Institutes of Health Director Jay Bhattacharya says the project that will study the causes of autism will take longer than initially indicated. NTD correspondent Jayson reports.
NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya says that the study looking into the causes of autism will take a little longer than the projected September date by Secretary of Health Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Bhattacharya says that he thinks preliminary results will be pulled out within a year. The NIH will be leading the project that is expected to be formally announced within 2 weeks.
We're going to announce a series of new studies to identify precisely what the environmental toxins are that are causing it. This has not been done before.
Bhattacharya says that he thinks to answer the question of why autism is rising, there needs to be large samples of people. He says that they'd like to, quote, get access to the medical records of a large portion of the American population, and these records would be a very important part of the study. Dr. Bhattacharya says the reason that autism is rising is a question that is at the front of the minds of so many parents across the country worried about their kids. And yet, scientific progress on this has been slow because scientists are frankly scared to ask the question. Bhattacharya said that the budget for the study has not been set yet. And Health Director Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says that the Health Department will be restoring their Freedom of Information Act or FOIA offices.
And we're going to try to get as close as we can to total transparency.
The HHS told NTD sister media, The Epoch Times, that these cuts were part of streamlining operations and improving efficiency, and that the FOIA offices within the agency did not communicate with each other or report to the department.
The papers that we produce in this agency do not belong to us. They belong to the American people.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jayson Blair, NTD News.
Now to a massive wildfire in eastern New Jersey that could be record-setting. Today, officials lifted earlier evacuation orders that apply to more than 3,000 people, and a closed section of the Garden State Parkway, one of New Jersey's busiest highways, has reopened. NTD's David Lamb reports.
On average, 1,500 wildfires damage or destroy 7,000 acres of New Jersey's forests each year, according to the State Fire Service. But the current 12,500-acre wildfire in New Jersey could become record-setting.
We fully expect that number will grow, that we will see ultimately, when all is said and done, a greater number of acreage affected. And this could very well end up being the largest wildfire in New Jersey in 20 years.
The Jones Road fire started Tuesday morning. As of Wednesday afternoon, it's 40% contained.
We dispatched resources right off the bat. They arrived on location. The wildfire was about 10 to 20 acres upon arrival.
Luckily, no injuries have been reported, but officials said more than 1,000 structures were in danger of burning down. The fire spread rapidly Tuesday afternoon, expanding to more than 8,500 acres in southern New Jersey.
The cause of the fire itself remains under investigation. Thankfully, no residential structures were lost. We did lose one commercial structure. Some outbuildings were also affected and several vehicles as well. And around 5,000 residents were under either mandatory or voluntary evacuations, and those evacuation orders have been lifted.
According to PowerOutage.us, more than 26,000 customers were impacted in Ocean County. Acting New Jersey Governor Tahisha Wei declared a state of emergency on Wednesday. New Jersey fire officials expect the Jones Road fire to continue to burn for several days until rain comes on Friday or Saturday. David Lamb, NTD News.
In just over 2 weeks, a major change is coming for air travelers across the U.S. Starting next month, the TSA will require adults flying domestically to present a real ID, compliant driver's license, or other approved identification. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
We're standing outside of a packed DMV here in the city of El Monte, where many people are lining up to get their real ID before May 7th. You may begin the process online, however, you will have to finish it at the DMV. Soon, travelers will need a real ID to board domestic flights. After the May 7, 2025 deadline, it will also be required to enter federal facilities like military bases and courthouses. Without a compliant ID, travelers risk being turned away at airport security. This is part of the Real ID Act of 2005, born out of the 9/11 Commission's push for stronger ID standards. Real IDs are marked with a star or a design like California's Bear Outline. Other acceptable IDs include U.S. passports, military IDs, DHS trusted traveler cards like Global Entry, and acceptable photo IDs issued by a federally recognized tribal nation Indian tribe, just to name a few. To get a real ID, you'll need documents proving your full legal name, social security number, address, and legal presence. One Southern California resident shared his experience navigating the process.
I've been here for maybe 20 minutes, so not too bad. Yeah, the line's moving pretty slow, but yeah, not too bad. A lot of stuff was online, like they had us upload our document, like some documents like a birth certificate or a water bill to prove we live here. And just like basic information like address, things like that, just to prove you live here.
In California, the DMV is extending hours at select offices, including 3 in the Bay Area, on Saturday, May 3rd to help meet the deadline. Individual states may have additional requirements. For more information or assistance, contact your state's driver's licensing agency online or in person. Reporting from the city of Almani, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, a foreign agent case is scheduled to go to trial this summer. Linda Sun, former aide to 2 New York governors, facing accusations that she helped further Beijing's interests while serving as a state official. We have the latest. And the European Commission fines U.S. tech giants Apple and Meta a combined near $800 million for antitrust breaches. These are the first sanctions under legislation aimed at curbing big tech power in Europe. Malcolm Hudson reports from London after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Next, updates on a landmark foreign agent case, the United States versus Linda Sun. A judge announced today that her case is scheduled to go to trial in late July. Here's the story.
Earlier today in the Eastern District Court of New York, Linda Sun and her husband, co-defendant Chris Hu, appeared alongside their attorneys for a court conference. The polished-look couple allegedly earned millions of dollars in kickbacks for their ties to the Chinese regime. During the court meeting, a prosecutor revealed that they are finalizing Chinese translations of evidence against Sun. Those include text messages, emails, and other communications between Sun and Chinese officials. These materials are expected to be made public during the trial. Sun served as New York Governor Kathy Hochul's top aide in charge of Asian affairs. In 2023, Sun was fired for misconduct without specifying reasons. Last September, federal law enforcement arrested her and her husband. They now face multiple criminal accounts. Sun is accused of acting as an unregistered foreign agent of Communist China, making her case one of the most high-profile cases of its kind. The government accuses Sun of furthering Beijing's interest while being a state official, including disclosing internal COVID-related meetings to Chinese diplomats and blocking Taiwanese officials' interactions with 2 New York governors. Images show Sun had attended multiple meetings hosted by China's spy agency and other state entities.
The European Commission fines U.S. tech giants Apple and Meta nearly $800 million combined for antitrust breaches. These are the first sanctions under landmark legislation aimed at curbing the power of big tech in Europe. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us.
The European Commission fined Apple $570 million and Meta nearly $230 million. It comes after a ruling that both companies had restricted customer choices and violated the European Union's Digital Markets Act. Member of European Parliament Andreas Schwab said European law is becoming very costly for companies that don't obey it.
The message is very clear. Competition matters. Open societies need open markets. That's an important message for Europe, but also for the US. And we hope to endeavor with these decisions to get more services for our citizens.
The Digital Markets Act, or DMA, seeks to ensure that large gatekeeper platforms operate in a fair way and allow room for competitors. The European Commission found Apple imposed restrictions on developers, which meant they could not take full benefit of distribution channels other than Apple's App Store. As for Meta, the EU's fines relate to the company's consent or pay advertising model. EU users of Instagram and Facebook had to choose between consent for Meta to use their private data for advertising or pay a monthly subscription for an ad-free service. Under the DMA, gatekeeper platforms must provide a less personalized but equivalent alternative to users who do not consent to the usage of their personal data. A Meta spokesperson told the Epoch Times that the European Commission is attempting to handicap successful American businesses while allowing Chinese and European companies to operate under different standards. In a statement to Reuters, Apple said it would challenge the EU fine and called it another example of being unfairly targeted in decisions that are bad for the privacy and security of users. The fines come amid trade tensions between the United States and the EU, notably the tariffs. The Trump administration is expected to scrutinize the DMA and could respond with tariff-like action.
These measures have nothing to do with trade policy. It's European law, and European law has to be enforced.
The companies are required to comply with the Commission's decisions within 60 days. Failing to do so could lead to their being charged with periodic penalty payments. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Coming up, a high-profile Supreme Court case involving LGBT storybooks in elementary school classrooms has brought together parents of different religious backgrounds. Author Bethany Mandel joins us to discuss what the lawsuit boils down to and what's at stake for American education. And in the NBA playoffs, the defending champion Boston Celtics may be shorthanded tonight as they take on Orlando in Game 2. We'll have all the details and more when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Supreme Court heard arguments yesterday in a high-profile case brought against a Maryland school board by 6 parents who are Catholic and Muslim. They want the schools to provide opt-outs for parents who have religious objections to LGBT books read in elementary schools. The schools say an earlier effort to allow opt-outs was disruptive. Joining us now to discuss this case is Bethany Mandel. She's the co-author of the book Stolen Youth: How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. Bethany, thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you here. Now, following that marathon 2+ hour oral arguments yesterday, give us a rundown of what this case boils down to.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started about 2 years ago when the Montgomery County Public Schools decided that LGBTQ books would become mandatory. And they had introduced these books a year prior, not into sort of the sexuality portion of the curriculum, but into English language arts, which means you're not automatically granted an opt-out. But they had been granting an opt-out. And then, according to Montgomery County Public Schools in their oral arguments yesterday, too many parents objected to this material. And their response wasn't to evaluate the material and maybe consider that they should honor the wishes of the parents that were en masse pulling their kids out, but instead remove the ability of these parents to opt their children out. These are books about extreme gender and sexual themes. Along the lines of, they were talking about it during the oral arguments yesterday, a book that was written for 3- and 4-year-olds, not 3rd and 4th grade, 3- and 4-year-olds, that featured a sex worker, that featured the word leather. And there were debates in the Supreme Court yesterday about the context of leather for a book written for 3- and 4-year-olds. So it was a very contentious situation for the last 2 years here in Maryland, in Montgomery County, Maryland. And the school board meetings were completely taken over by this debate for 2 straight years. The Montgomery County Public Schools have spent upwards of $2 million to fight this case through the district courts, and now it's landed at the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has in front of them the ability to decide a case that it hasn't decided anything like this in close to 50 years, how parental rights can interface with the public school system. And in that case, Yoder versus Wisconsin in 1972, they delivered a decisive victory in favor of parental rights. And this case goes well beyond that one. So this really has the potential to change the landscape for parental rights in the public school system, which has been a huge cultural flashpoint in this country for the last 5 to 10 years.
A lot at stake for sure. I want to dig into one of the areas you touched on because the school board's attorneys are arguing that kids aren't being coerced to modify their religious beliefs or practices and that the opt-out option became, quote, unworkably disruptive. How do you view that argument?
I mean, I sort of touched on a little bit the fact that so many parents wanted to opt their children out. That's not the fault of the parents. They are well within their rights to determine what their children are being taught. And during the oral arguments, there was a little bit of an interesting revelation. The fact that Montgomery County Public School, their lawyer, admitted that the purpose here is to influence children. And the influence, the subject matter is to influence kids away from the religious beliefs of their parents. During school board meetings and during county council meetings, there were really fascinating and disturbing exchanges. In one circumstance, there was a young teenager who testified that they felt uncomfortable with these books and didn't want to sit through these lessons because they felt uncomfortable being forced to do so. And one of the school board members said that she felt pity for this student because she felt like she was being indoctrinated by the bigoted dogma of her parents. A county council member said that compared these parents who by and large are immigrants from the Middle East and who are Muslim and also from Africa, she compared them to white supremacists and bigots. And CARE actually released a press release condemning both of those individuals, the school board member and the county council member. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I don't often cite CARE, but in that circumstance, they were absolutely correct. There was a lot of bigotry on the part of the county council and on the school board.
And just as Kavanaugh yesterday saying he was mystified how there are no opt-outs for this when the counties have a history of opt-outs for all sorts of things. Given your own background covering this topic, why do you think this issue has been singled out?
So I think that this has happened here in Montgomery County before. This county is sort of a testing ground for progressives who have control of everything here. Democrats decide everything from the county level, in every office. They really have total control here. It's a suburb of Washington, D.C. It's incredibly blue. And so they have the ability to sort of test out educational theories and policies here. And I think that that's what they were doing here. They wanted to see if they could make this mandatory in a place like Montgomery County and what that would look like. And unfortunately, that's come at the expense of taxpayer dollars like mine, because they've spent, again, upwards of $2 million to bring this case to the Supreme Court. And they're also facing a lawsuit from me, Bethany Mandel, because in the course of all of these fights, there was a school board meeting that they decided to close to the public, including journalists like myself. It was a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And so they also blocked me on Twitter. That is also a violation of my rights as a citizen. And so I have a lawsuit pending with Montgomery County Public Schools. They're probably going to end up paying out on that. They've certainly been paying legal fees to fight me. All of this has cost taxpayers a great deal of money. And when 55% of the county's kids are reading on grade level, it's an inexcusable waste of taxpayer dollars.
And Bethany, as you mentioned earlier, this, of course, is a very important case for parental rights and religious freedom. And that seems to be playing out in terms of who's united behind this issue. Yes. You see parents who are Muslims, Catholics, Latter-day Saints. They've all come together to protest this opt-out ban. What do you make of that, the uniting of what some might say are very different beliefs?
Yeah, they're very different factions. And it's been very interesting, again, as an Orthodox Jew, having to talk to Muslim parents over the course of the last 2 years and, running for school board. And I heard from a lot of these parents, I never thought I'd pull the lever for a Zionist, but here I am, calling myself a Zionist, because at the end of the day, they felt like there was no one who was running for school board in the district that I was running in who would defend their rights as a parent. It's been really interesting seeing these coalitions form. And, internally, I'm in all of these chats. I'm an opinion journalist who's been covering this for 2 years. And as you can hear, I have a very clear opinion on this case. We've sort of decided to bifurcate, a foreign policy situation in Gaza with parental rights here in Montgomery County, Maryland, that affect hundreds of thousands of kids here. So it's been a very interesting coalition building experience that I think can and should be replicated nationwide, learning where you have similarities and where you can find common ground, and achieving an impact for liberty and for children.
A lot at stake for sure. Bethany Mandel, thank you so much for your time. The first round of the NBA playoffs continue tonight with 3 games on the schedule, including one with defending champion Boston, but the Celtics may be without their best player. NTD's Dave Martin has more.
Celtics All-Star forward Jayson Tatum is listed as doubtful for tonight's game against Orlando after suffering a bone bruise in his right wrist during Sunday's win. Tatum landed awkwardly after being fouled on a dunk attempt by Magic guard Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who was hit with a flagrant foul on the play. Tatum stayed on the floor briefly before getting to his feet and was seen clenching his wrist afterward, although he managed to stay in the game. X-rays came back negative. Regardless, the Celtics are 10.5-point favorites for tonight's Game 2. Also on tap for tonight, Cleveland looks to take a 2-0 lead as well over Miami. The Cavs got 28 points from sixth man Ty Jerome in Game 1, including 16 in the crucial fourth quarter to seal the victory. And finally, the 7th-seeded Golden State Warriors look to take a 2-0 lead on the road at Houston tonight. The Warriors led by as many as 23 points in their Game 1 win Sunday, but Houston cut the lead to just 4 points late in the fourth quarter. That's when Jimmy Butler essentially closed things out, hitting 3 shots in a row down the stretch to win the game for the Warriors. Warriors coach Steve Kerr praised his play afterwards.
He has that impact every game. He calms things down. He's very confident. He's very poised. He always believes we're going to win. Jimmy is he's one of the best players in the league, and that's what the best players in the league do. It's not just about scoring or stats. It's about settling the game down, having the presence and the nature to compete and win games like this.
And in global track and field news, Kenya's Faith Kipyegon will attempt to become the first woman ever to run a sub-4-minute mile in Nike's special Breaking 4 project. The 3-time reigning Olympic champion in the women's 1,500-meter run, Kipyegon also holds the women's record in the mile when she posted a 4:07 time 2 years ago. Although details of the Breaking 4 project have yet to be released, if they're similar to a previous Nike project that helped aid the first sub-2-hour marathon time, they might be using in-and-out pacer runners as well as pacer lights, which would mean any record broken might not be officially recognized. The event will take place on June 26th in Paris. This is Dave Martin for NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.